It's not a party unless there's cake, and I'm making a cake, so let's party. Today I'm going to show you how to make a one-bowl chocolate cake. I'm Grant, and this is So Basic. Yummy. Chocolate cake is one of those things that I think people have a lot of trouble with. What I've decided to do today is show you guys how to make a cake that is very similar to using a box cake mix because it just takes one bowl to make. And I'm also going to show you guys some really cool baking tips along the way that you can use for any baking recipe. First, we're going to start by measuring our dry ingredients. So over here I have some flour. And I want to show you guys a really great tip on how to measure your dry ingredients at home. So not only are you getting a perfect measurement, but you're not wasting any ingredients at all. We're going to need 1.25 cups of flour. And if you look below, you can see that I'm measuring it over a piece of parchment paper. So when you're measuring your dry ingredients, you kind of want to pile them on top. You don't want to press them down, just kind of want to scoot them around to the sides. And then to level it off, you just grab an offset spatula, and then you just scoot all of that excess flour right over your parchment paper. You take that, and you pour it right back into your flour bin. So you're not wasting any flour at all, and you have a perfect measurement. I'm going to pour this into a sifter that I have placed over our bowl. I'm using a dark chocolate cocoa powder, but you can use anything you like. And when you're measuring this, it's okay if there's some lumps in it because we're gonna take those out in the sifter that we have right here. Here we go. And now we're gonna do the same with our baking powder. Now the baking powder, you don't really need the parchment for because you can do it right over top of the canister. So 1/2 teaspoon of that. Same with the baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of that. So now I'm just gonna sift everything. I put everything into a sifter, and all you do is just lightly tap it to make sure you don't have any lumps. Cocoa powder, especially in the summertime, has a tendency to get some humidity in it and it kind of like clumps up a little bit. So you end up with these like little balls like this. Just keep tapping because eventually you'll get them all to come through. And then once you get to a point where they're really tiny and they're not going through the sifter, I just use the back of my thumb and just kind of crush them through. Now we're gonna whisk up our dry ingredients. I'm gonna add in 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And now we're going to add in 1 cup of sugar. And this one we can just level off right into the canister. See, I should have used my parchment because I just got sugar all over the countertop. So that goes into our sifter. Sift our sugar. We're gonna give it one more whisk. So we have all of our dry ingredients in there. I'm gonna go back here and grab our wet ingredients. So we have a little bit of oil, we have some buttermilk. You always wanna make sure that you're using room temperature eggs. If you use cold eggs and you put them into the batter, it has a tendency to sort of make the batter lump up a little bit. So these eggs I just took out of the fridge, they're super cold. So what I'm gonna do, I only need 1 egg for this recipe. I'm gonna put it into a bowl and I'm just gonna pour some warm water over the top. You could just use warm tap water, but I'm using this tea kettle to give a very dramatic effect. And you just let that egg sit in that warm water for just about 5 minutes and it's gonna come up to room temperature super quick. This is kind of a secret ingredient. It's something that I always add to chocolate cake, and it's instant espresso powder. It's sort of like whenever you add vanilla extract to cookies, this espresso powder is going to sort of enhance the flavor of the chocolate. So I'm gonna add in 2 teaspoons of that. I'm gonna whisk that up again. Now I'm gonna make a well in the middle, and that well is where we're going to add in all of our wet ingredients. Buttermilk, I love adding to cake because it both gives it a little bit of acidity, so it has like a little bit of a tang, but it also, since it's thicker than milk, it gives it more moisture. So you're gonna end up having a much more moist cake than you typically would. So we have 2/3 cup of buttermilk. That goes right into our well. We're going to add in 1/4 cup of oil. And now this is another really great tip whenever you're making a chocolate cake. I always like to add in a little bit of warm water. The reason we add warm water to chocolate cake is because it allows the cocoa powder to bloom. Bloom is basically a fancy word of saying like brew. If you think of cocoa powder like coffee, they're kind of the same. Like they're both beans that have been roasted. And you can eat coffee by itself and it tastes like coffee, but it doesn't have that intense coffee flavor until it meets that warm water. So that's why we add warm water to chocolate cake. So I have 1/4 cup of warm water. We're just gonna add that right into here. And now our egg is at nice room temperature. We're just gonna break that into the well. Now it's time to get mixing. We start in the middle of the well and we work our way out. And you wanna make sure you're doing this on a low speed. Another important step is you wanna scrape down the sides. Make sure you give the bottom a good scrape just to make sure there's no dry ingredients trying to hide from your batter. Mix it up one more time. All right, great. I'm gonna go grab our cake pan and I'm gonna lick the batter. Today I'm gonna use a non-stick springform pan. What I do like to do to ensure that the cake doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan is to make a round of parchment paper, and you just put that in the bottom. So now we just pour our cake batter into our pan, and then I like to give it a little tap on the countertop. Sometimes some air bubbles get trapped, and you need to make sure you shake some of those guys out. This is just an insurance policy, just to make sure if your cake leaks out a little bit, it doesn't go into the bottom of your oven. We're gonna bake this at 350 degrees for about 30 to 35 minutes. Here we go. We asked you guys on YouTube what your favorite kind of cake is, and this is what you said. 57% said chocolate, 27% said vanilla, and 16% said other. So let's see what some of those other cakes are. Peyton commented and said marble or red velvet cake. And I do love a red velvet cake because I love cream cheese frosting. Manel commented and said his favorite cake is fruit cake, which of all the cakes in the world, I'm shocked that that's your favorite cake. Maybe Manel is like Santa Claus's alias on YouTube or something. Carla commented and said her favorite cake is cheesecake, which brings up the question, is cheesecake even a cake? I don't know, but I mean, there's a cake in the title, so fine, it's a cake. Kayla commented and said her favorite cake is carrot cake or lemon cake. I actually love carrot cake. That's my favorite cake if it has cream cheese frosting. If you put cream cheese frosting on fruit cake, then that would be my favorite cake. No, it still wouldn't because it's still fruit cake. For all of the cakes that you guys mentioned, we happen to have recipes for them on our website, so you can check out this link and make them for yourself. While the cake bakes in the oven, we're gonna get started on our 5-ingredient chocolate frosting. Obviously, a little bit of butter goes in. By a little bit, I mean 2 sticks of butter. The trick here is you wanna make sure you're using really, really soft butter. I'm barely even touching it with my spatula. You want it that soft. We're using unsalted butter, so I'm gonna add in a half a teaspoon of salt. So I have 3 cups of powdered sugar that I sifted to make sure there's no lumps in it. So we're gonna add half, because if we add all of it, then it has a tendency to kind of clump up a little bit. The key to making a really good buttercream like this is just taking your time and having some patience with it. Our first round of powdered sugar went in quite nicely. So I'm gonna add in the rest of our powdered sugar. Beat that up a little bit more. There we go. And now to give it our nice chocolatey flavor, we're going to add a half a cup of cocoa powder. I'm going to add in 2 tablespoons of heavy cream. And what this is gonna do is going to help us get a nice whipped frosting, but it's also gonna help that chocolate incorporate into the powdered sugar and butter mixture. Mix that up and see what happens. Oh geez, it's fine. No crying over a little spilled cream, am I right? I'm gonna add in a little bit more just to get this to come together. It's come together quite nicely. I want it to be a little bit softer and a little bit more spreadable, so I'm gonna add in another tablespoon of heavy cream if I have any left. It's kind of all over the countertop. So we've added about 4 tablespoons total of heavy cream. And when we turn up the speed, we're gonna start to whip the frosting and we're gonna incorporate some air into it. So we'll kind of change the color of the frosting. So once you see that frosting kind of lighten up a little bit, you know you're on the right track. And once you get to that, you wanna stop, because you don't wanna over whip your frosting. There's our 5-ingredient, 1 bowl frosting, and 2 snacks. We asked you guys on YouTube what your biggest problem is when cooking cake. Alex commented and said that the center is always uncooked while the edges are burned. Alex, there's 2 things you want to check here. You want to make sure that your oven is at the proper temperature, so maybe you need to recalibrate your oven. The other thing too is that you want to make sure you preheat your oven before you put your cake in. Nada commented and said that her cake never lasts long enough for her to eat. Well, Nada, it sounds like everybody loves your cake, so that's a good thing. But here's a tip. If you make the cake, maybe give yourself the first slice too. Priyanka commented and said that her biggest issue with baking cake is that it's uncooked in the middle. Well, Priyanka, you always want to test your cake with a toothpick when it comes out of the oven to make sure it's cooked. Let me show you how. What we need to do is take a toothpick and poke it, until you're about in the middle of the cake. Then take it out. So it looks like the cake is not finished because there's a little bit of batter on the end of the toothpick. So I'm gonna put it back in the oven for 5 more minutes and then we'll test it again. So I'm gonna take our toothpick and just place it right into the middle. And then we remove it. And there's no batter on it, so that means it's perfectly done. So now we're gonna let our cake cool, which is something that you definitely need to do whenever you make a cake. All right, so our chocolate cake is completely cool. So now we're gonna start frosting our cake. So since we used a springform pan, I'm just going to run my offset spatula, you can use a knife, around the sides just to make sure you don't have anything sticking. Now we're just going to detach the side and lift it up. Ooh, look at that chocolate cake. The This is an important step as we need to remove the parchment on the bottom of the cake. So we're just going to invert it and remove the parchment. There we go. Now I'm gonna place this onto a plate. All right, so now we're gonna start frosting our cake. And what I do is just take a big mound of it, put it right in the center, just like that. Now we're gonna take an offset spatula and just kind of start scooting the frosting out and about while twirling it in the middle. And just do a couple nice pretty swirls like this. But for me, it's not cake unless there's a bunch of sprinkles on top. So I'm gonna grab a little jar of sprinkles. If you don't have any sprinkles, you could just dust it with some cocoa powder, dust it with some powdered sugar, or you could just not garnish it at all because it's gonna be a delicious cake whether there's sprinkles on it or not. So we finished our 1-bowl chocolate cake with our super simple 5-ingredient frosting, and now we have one thing left to do, and that's to taste. And look at that beautiful dark chocolate cake with chocolate frosting. What's better than chocolate cake? Nothing. This is so good. I can't stop eating it. So now I've got my cake, and I'm gonna eat it too. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of So Basic. For more cooking videos like these, make sure you subscribe to the Rachael Ray Show. And if you make this dish at home, make sure you share it with us using the hashtag #GrandSoBasic. Thanks, guys. Do I have anything in my tea? Yummy.